Coming up on today's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, training camp opens up this week for the Silver and Black. Who's in, who's out, and who could be on the way? That plus a whole lot more comes up on today's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, Monday, July 24th, 2023.
Just win. Just win. Just win. Just win.
The autumn wind is a raider, pillaging just for fun. He'll knock you round and upside down and laugh when he's conquered and won. And won. And won. And won. And won.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. Make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast to get the latest edition of the show. And, of course, as always, if you're checking us out on YouTube, thank you so much. Really cannot tell you how much we appreciate you not only rocking with us on the audio side of things when it comes to the podcast, but also taking time out of your day to check us out on YouTube. The page has grown in a major way, and that's all because of you. So we definitely appreciate that. And, of course, it's also because of my man Ari, who does a great job each and every day making sure we're up on YouTube. You can check him out on Twitter at Ari Produces. You want to hit me up on Twitter, you can do that at your boy Q254. And of course, the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line 707-654-4693. Those calls are coming up in segment number 3 of today's show. Segment number 2. On Friday, I talked about rookies that I'll be paying attention to when camp opens up on Wednesday. Of course, the rookies have already reported. The veterans will report on Tuesday. We'll talk to head coach Josh McDaniels on Tuesday as well. And then the first day of actual practice is going to be on Wednesday. So we still don't have a schedule, a real schedule as far as, what days they're going to be practicing, what days they won't be practicing. But we do know that Josh McDaniels will be talking with him on Tuesday at 9:30 in the morning Pacific time. And then after the first day of practice, we'll get about 4 or 5 players following that. Of course, then I got my radio show to do after that on Raider Nation Radio 920 Unnecessary Roughness. But it all gets real this week, right? So kiss the babies goodbye, kiss the wife, tell everyone I'll see you after the Super Bowl, because football season, for what I know it is absolutely back. So this week, it gets real. So segment number 2, I'll talk about, instead of rookies like I did on Friday, talk about some veterans that I'll be keying in on while I'm out there at practice at the Intermountain Healthcare Performance Center. That's coming up in segment number 2. Here in segment number 1, I'd like to give you the news and notes of the day. And on Mondays, I like to hit you with all the news and notes gathered over the weekend and everything on Friday as well. So we got plenty to get to as far as news and notes. Before I do that, though, I want you to know today's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. They help you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. So let's go ahead and get things started. On Friday, Ian Rappaport from NFL Network tweeted out the Raiders will host free agent cornerback Marcus Peters for a visit and workout on Monday. The Raiders visited with Peters earlier this spring. Now we'll take another close look before training camp. The former All-Pro and Pro Bowler has been with the Ravens since 2019. That's from Ian Rappaport. And that just kind of confirmed what Vic Tafur had already put out. That confirmed what Vinny Bonsignore had already put out, and many others, that Marcus Peters was going to be a Raider sooner rather than later. So depending on what time you're listening to this show, he may have already visited with the team and already signed with the team. So that's something that, as far as I'm concerned, you don't come in for a second visit unless you're going to sign. And so I do believe sometime today we'll get the announcement of cornerback Marcus Peters, now a member of the Silver and Black. The interesting thing will be, what's the corresponding move going to be? And I'm not saying it's going to be a massive move, but I'm just interested to see what the corresponding move will be. You have to have 90 men when you go to training camp, and because the Raiders have an international player, they're actually allowed 91, but they sure ain't allowed 92. So something's got to give when it comes down to that roster. There'll be a corresponding move made, and that goes with anybody that they sign, as I'm hearing that there's a couple other players that could be visiting the facility this week as well. But for sure, Marcus Peters today, and again, depending on what time you're listening to this, there's a good chance that he may have already signed with the Silver and Black. And if not, well, then quickly afterwards that visit, he probably will make that signing official. We also found out on Friday, and this was kind of one of those, not a surprise and a surprise at the same time. Tyree Wilson and Byron Young both unavailable to start camp. And Byron Young, if you remember, going back to Friday's show, that was a guy that I was interested and intrigued by. If you missed Friday's show, Chris Smith, the 5th-round pick out of Georgia, Byron Young, 3rd-round pick out of Alabama, Michael Mayer, 2nd-round pick out of Notre Dame, and the undrafted free agent Drake Thomas, linebacker from NC State, were the 4 guys that I wanted to focus in on when practice gets started on Wednesday. Well, Byron Young, we found out he's not going to start camp practicing, so that was kind of disappointing. But Vinny Bonsignore put out a tweet. Raiders rookie defensive end Tyree Wilson will start training camp on the NFI list, and with defensive tackle Byron Young will start on the PUP list. Wilson's case coming off the foot injury he suffered last year. The designation was expected and gives him time to ramp up before getting the full green light. NFI designations for players who suffered an injury outside of the NFL. Wilson was still in college at Tech when he hurt his foot. So that was Tyree Wilson. Not a big surprise there, right? I thought there was a good chance that he wasn't going to be starting practice on Wednesday with everybody else just because they're trying to, get him ramped up and get him good to go. But everything that I've heard from multiple people is he's going to be good to go. They're just trying to slow play it with him. They don't want to take any chances. They want to make sure he's 100%. So nothing to worry about there. Vinny goes on to say Young's situation was not clarified, although the sense is it's not a long-term issue. And I'll say this, and I had Vic Tafer on my radio show on Friday as well, and I said, Vic, was that a surprise? Because I never heard anything about Byron Young being injured. And he said, yeah, that was a big surprise to me. And so that is disappointing, right? The Raiders have their 2 out of their 3 top picks from the draft aren't going to start practice on time, right? You just don't want that to be the case. You don't want injuries to get into the way of this team trying to come together, especially when there's so many new parts, including Byron Young. And that's a guy, I'm hoping that he's not out very long. Of course, that'll be a question that we ask Josh McDaniels on Tuesday, and I'm not going to say how long do you anticipate Byron Young being out because he'll never give you a timetable. That's the first thing he'll say. I'm not going to put a timetable on it, and if I don't get to ask that question beforehand, somebody probably will ask about Byron Young and ask how long he's going to be out, and I promise you he'll say I'm not going to put a timetable on it, right? But I will ask him, hey, how concerning is Byron Young? Do you think this is going to be a long-term situation, right? Do you think he's going to get some time in camp? Ask him a question where he can actually answer it without just saying, I'm not worried about it, or, I'm not going to put a timetable on it, something like that. So that's going to definitely be a question because that was a surprise to me when I heard that Byron Young wasn't going to be participating. So that's something to pay attention to. Also, we found out on Sunday, Jimmy Garoppolo, he passed his physical. Adam Schefter tweeted out, Raiders quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo spent his offseason recovering from a foot injury, did in fact pass his training camp physical, and is expected to begin training camp with his teammates per league source. Raiders are not placing him on the physically unable to perform list. One last thing, and this comes from Vinny Bonsignore, if the Raiders at any point now that Jimmy G has passes physical and is on the roster and is good to go, if at any point the Raiders need salary cap space, they can now reverse engineer the structure of Jimmy G's contract. They converted his $11.25 million signing bonus into actual salary when he didn't pass the physical back in March. But now that he has passed the physical, if they do happen to need some extra salary cap space, they can finagle it a little bit and do what they have to do with it to get it where they need it to be. So that's good. But more importantly, it's just good that Jimmy G is going to be there. Right? I mean, there was the sense for quite a while has been from everyone I've talked to, and I've even passed this along on the show, that he's going to be available to start training camp. But until you actually see it and hear it, right, it's always going to be a question. And now the question is going to be how quickly can he get up to speed with his guys, right? How quickly can they all get on the same page and him be that quarterback one that the Raiders need? But we'll talk more about him coming up in segment number 2. That's what you call a tease. One other note, on Saturday here in Vegas, they had the Battle for Vegas, the charity softball game that they do. It's the 4th annual one, the Golden Knights and the Raiders. I did not go. I've gone to every one since I've been here. I didn't go. Spent some time with the family on Saturday, a little bit of a relaxing time. Me and Lil Q actually went to Slam Ball on Friday. That was pretty fun here at the Cox Pavilion in Las Vegas. That was cool to see, but I didn't go. It was a sold-out event, and from what I heard and saw on Twitter, Nate Hobbs was actually trying to catch a fly ball, and the ball went right and hit him in the eye. Of course, right? It hit him in the eye, and he was pretty bloody, but he laughed it off. He stayed in the game, kept playing. So I think he's good to go. I don't think it should be a problem. The Raiders did lose that game 22-21, but again, doesn't matter. You just hate to see a guy get injured at all, and so you don't want Nate Hobbs to be injured. I don't think this is a big deal, but that did happen in the charity softball game on Saturday here in Las Vegas. So that's what I got for you for segment number 1 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast, news and notes of the day, what I gathered over the weekend. Coming up in segment number 2, the veterans that I'm looking forward to watching and why. I talked about the rookies on Friday. Going to talk about the veterans on today's show coming up in segment number 2. Before I get to that, though, I do want to tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is LinkedIn Jobs. And these days, well, I'm sure you know, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. I know plenty of people that own their own businesses, and trying to find quality help is so difficult. You want to be 100% certain you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs help you find the right people for your team faster and free. What you need to do is go to LinkedIn Jobs, add your job in the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. They have simple tools like screening questions. They make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and who you'd like to hire so you don't waste your time. You know how valuable your time is. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hire versus leading competitors. Right now, LinkedIn Jobs will help you find the qualified candidate you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Want to talk about veterans, the veterans that I'll be looking forward to checking out when practice starts on Wednesday. We'll be at the Intermountain Healthcare Performance Center on Tuesday at 9:30 in the morning to hear from head coach Josh McDaniels, and then that'll be it for us. And then on Wednesday is the first day of practice, and we'll be out there bright and early. We still do not have a schedule. Still do not know what time that's even going to start. And this is something that happened last year as well. Josh McDaniels and company, they are working on finalizing the schedule, but they really don't get it till like the last minute. So we don't actually have a physical schedule yet to say, okay, this is the day when, this quarterback, Jimmy Garoppolo's talking. This is the day Devontae's talking. This is when this is happening. We don't have that as of right now. We'll get it sooner rather than later, but we do know the first day of practice is on Wednesday, and I believe their first off day is going to be on the 30th. But, again, that's nothing that's in concrete yet, so just kind of know that that's not 100% yet. But when it is, I'll let you know. So on Friday, I talked about rookies I'm looking forward to in camp. I said Chris Smith, the 5th-round pick out of Georgia, Byron Young, 3rd-round pick out of Alabama, defensive tackle. He won't be participating, so I won't be paying attention to him at least early on. I don't know how long that's going to last, but he won't be someone I see immediately at practice. So put an asterisk next to him, his name, Michael Mayer, 2nd-round pick out of Notre Dame, and then the undrafted free agent Drake Thomas. First and foremost, the #1 veteran that I'm going to be paying attention to is number 25. Trayvon Merrick, the 3rd-year safety out of TCU. He's a guy that I talked up quite a bit when the Raiders drafted him in the 2nd round. I thought that guy was going to be a difference maker. I thought that the Raiders found them a gem and thought he was a guy that should have gone in the 1st round. He ended up going in the 2nd round. And I'll tell you right now, from a point of view of a guy that really likes Trayvon Merrick, he has not lived up to the billing as of yet. I think this year is huge. So far, he's got 1 career interception. He's got to be a guy that is a difference maker. He's got to be a guy that finds a way to take the ball away. He's got to be a guy that's breaking up a lot of passes. And even some of the angles that he takes when he goes to tackle. And last year there were some angles that he took that's just like, what in the world is going on? Just didn't make the plays he needed to make. I think that he could be a really good player in this league. I really do. And I'm hoping that it clicks for him this year and he can figure it out. And I know he was banged up. He had the hip injury last year. I get it. I know it was a new scheme. I get it. But at the end of the day, man, you're playing safety. Right? I mean, there's just certain things that you just know how to do. And I know that different coaches look for different things. I get it. But sometimes Trayvon Merrick, to me, is so far in center field. It's almost like in baseball where they say, go stand back on the warning track. Don't let a ball get over his head. It's almost like that's what Trayvon Merrick was doing for the longest. And then when he would come up, it's like he just, like I said, would take some bad angles at time. He was a frustrating player to watch. And I think that this training camp is huge for him. I mean, I don't believe that he's in danger of not getting a roster spot, like getting released. But again, these guys didn't draft him. So, yeah, it would be bad to release a former 2nd-round pick, but only in his 3rd year. But again, these guys don't have any ties to him. So if they did it, they could say, hey, it wasn't on our watch. That was those guys, right? We tried to make it work last year and it didn't work. So I think training camp is big. Preseason is going to be big for Trayvon Merrick. Another guy that I'll be paying attention to, Hunter Renfro. He got the contract extension last season. Obviously Derek and Waller got the contract extensions as well. And looked like, man, this offense was going to be fantastic. Well, Waller and Renfro spent most of the season injured. And then when Hunter Renfro was in there, he just didn't look comfortable, right? And there's different styles, right? Hunter is a guy that kind of freelances a little bit when he's running his routes, but he finds a way to get open, right? Josh McDaniels is a guy who really wants it done his way. I feel like that the two can meet in the middle somewhere, right? I feel like that it doesn't have to be 100% McDaniels' way and it doesn't have to be 100% Hunter Renfro's way. They've got to be able to find a way to utilize that skill set because Hunter is a very skilled wide receiver, as we all know. And this Raiders offense, because you use all the weapons, right? It would be great to see Jacoby Myers, Hunter Renfro, and Devontae Adams all out there at the same time, right? Michael Mayer. Let's see them all out there at the same. I mean, why not? I just think that there's definitely room for that to happen. But Hunter Renfro's got to understand what McDaniels wants. McDaniels got to understand who Hunter Renfro is, how to use him, and hopefully Hunter's 100% healthy. I mean, remember when he got the concussion last year? I mean, it was really after that he was, he was very ineffective. Didn't really do hardly anything. And so they assigned him that contract extension, and then they didn't get very much return on their investment. And that's what led to all the trade conversation to the point where I even believed, like, man, I think Hunter is on his way out, right? And that's unfortunate because he's a hell of a player. So, we've talked earlier in this offseason leading up to training camp that there's a world where Hunter Renfro and Jacoby Myers and Trey Tucker can all coexist at least this year. So I'd like to see Hunter Renfro really start to look the part in training camp, right? Look like he's running the routes the way that, he's supposed to run the routes, or at least has the understanding of what he's going to do, and just look more comfortable out there. And when we saw him in OTAs and mandatory minicamp, I'm not going to lie, he looked pretty comfortable, right? I mean, we didn't get to see him every single day, but from what we got to see, I think that I think he looked pretty good. So I think that that's something to definitely look forward to. So we'll see, we'll see about Hunter Renfro, but that's definitely a guy that I'm paying attention to when it comes to training camp that's getting started on Wednesday. That'll be the first day of practice. My third one is almost like cheating, but it's not. These two guys are a combo package, and I think they've been a combo package for a while since we've been talking about these guys. That's Neil Farrell Jr. and Matthew Butler. Both guys were picked last season, drafted by Dave Ziegler last season, and didn't get much burn, right? But we've talked about them quite a bit. We keep talking about interior pressure. Who's going to help out Max Crosby? I talk a lot about Byron Young, the defensive tackle out of Alabama, and everyone says, don't forget Neil Farrell Jr. and Matthew Butler. Definitely not forgetting them. Definitely not forgetting. As a matter of fact, like I said, they kind of are like a tag team, right? They're almost one of those where you have to talk about both at the same time. You can't just talk about one. You got to talk about both. So I will be focusing on those guys to see how they're starting to come along, see if the Raiders are going to be able to get some extra burn from them. Everything I've heard from what they've done this offseason, staying back and staying at the facility and just basically living at the facility, that's great. But now when practice is going, and when it's the hot days of the summer, when the pads finally come on, what do they look like, right? Are their pad levels where they need to be? Are they able to penetrate the offensive line? Are they able to get there to the quarterback? Of course, there's no sacking the quarterback in training camp and practice. Obviously, they'll be going up against the Niners and the Rams, though, in joint practices, and that'll be something. They can't hit the quarterback, but still they can penetrate that offensive line and show that, okay, these guys got something. They got a little wiggle to them. So those are two guys that I'm very interested to see just because we didn't see hardly anything from their rookie year. So Neil Farrell Jr. and Matthew Butler. And the final one, I mentioned it a little bit in segment number one. I mentioned it as a little bit of a tease. Jimmy Garoppolo, right? I just need to see what he looks like. I want to see what he looks like with the weapons around him. I don't expect to see him at all in preseason. I expect that to be a lot of, Brian Hoyer and a lot of Aiden O'Connell and Chase Garbers. I don't expect to see Jimmy G at all, but he's got Devontae Adams. He's got Michael Mayer. He's got Hunter Renfro. He's got Jacoby Myers. When Josh Jacobs signs his contract, and I believe he'll sign it probably a week before training camp is over, maybe 2 weeks, just to get ramped up and be there week one. But I just want to see, he'll have Zamir White now. Just want to see what he looks like out there. What's the exchange look like between the center, Andre James and Jimmy G? Are they used to his cadence? How do the guys on the line of scrimmage, how do the wide receivers make sure that there's no false starts? Because look, this cadence from Jimmy G is different than the cadence that a lot of these guys remember from Derek Carr. So that's going to be different. So that's going to be a process, and that's why it's important that Jimmy's out there starting on Wednesday, and great sign because he passes physical on Sunday. So that's all great. But now they've got to put the work in and start coming together and start understanding each other. So that's obviously, we'll all be paying attention to Jimmy G, right? And unfortunately, we'll be paying attention to him probably super close. Like every time we don't see him in there for a rep or whatever, I'm not saying anyone's going to hit the panic button, but it's always going to be a concern like, hey, how's Jimmy coming along with the chemistry? That chemistry has got to be built. How quickly can he get up to speed with what Josh McDaniels wants him to do? Because does it look like the in and out is good? Like the communication between the coach and Jimmy is good? All of that's part of it. That's something that we'll all be focusing in on. And hopefully you start to see throughout training camp a lot of good passes, right? Like I said, a lot of good chemistry between him and Devontae, him putting the ball where Devontae wants it or expects it or needs it, right? And just going out there and looking like he could be an efficient quarterback. We won't know until that first week of Denver what he really is going to look like, but getting through training camp and looking like he's getting some chemistry with the guys and building that camaraderie with the guys, that's going to go a long way. So those are the four veterans that I'm looking forward to seeing starting on Wednesday: Trayvon Merrick, Hunter Renfro, Neil Farrell Jr., and Matthew Butler, kind of a package duo, and then Jimmy Garoppolo. Those are the ones for me. So what says you? 707-654-4693. That's the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line. Your calls and texts are coming up next to close out the show on this Monday, July 24th, 2023. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. We'll start things off with Brent from L.A. He's calling to talk about the front office, the Raider way, and what he feels is going on right now. Here he is, Brent from L.A.
Thank you. Brent from Los Angeles. I hope you're doing well, man. Always appreciate the show. You know, it's interesting. I'm listening to it right now. I'm listening to some of the callers. I don't want the Patriot way. I want the Raider way. And, you know, we're going away from that. And, you know, being 42 years old, as unfortunate as this is, I've seen plenty of the Raider way. And the Raider way is ineptitude, unfortunately falling short of expectations, winning the off season. And this front office is sneakily just kind of operating where, look, I get it, man. I'm a Raider fan for life. I understand the attraction to big free agents and going and overspending on Josh Jacobs because that's what I learned to do through being a Raider fan. However, I also looked at disciplined teams that made the right kind of moves for longevity, and I'm also a Dodger fan. So I know it's too early to evaluate this front office and the coach. However, I feel it is very similar and parallel to the way that the Dodgers run their organization, where they put their toe in the water and they go get large free agents from time to time, but most importantly, they are building from within and they are building a culture in the organization. So to this most recent caller about, I want the Raider way, not the Patriot way, hey, big dog, I'm a Raider fan for life, Raider Nation all day. Most importantly, I want the Patriots winning. At the end of the day, we're all sports fans to collectively see our team actually be successful, and that's what brings you the greatest joy in sports. People take it too far, try to get too personal, and that's when sports becomes toxic and unhealthy. And the Raider fan base is known for being very emotionally invested, and so am I. But it's also the reason that I feel some of these snap judgments were made. And Al Davis, one of the most important figures ever in the NFL. However, the game has changed, and it's moved beyond that type of behavior. So I think these guys are doing the right things at this point. I am cautiously optimistic, but I cannot remember another offseason where I felt more positive about the fact that we're not out making moves that just are head scratchers or the Chandler Jones movements, because Chandler obviously is not going to work out, it would seem. So we're learning from those mistakes. We're putting people in the right position, and the only way to build this is through consistency. You cannot go out there, and the Rams are going to be terrible for years. The Raiders are trying to build something that has a consistent ability to be competitive every year. Let's see how this thing works out. All right, Q. One love, man. Keep doing what you're doing.
Brent, thanks for the call, my man. I appreciate you. And, again, I've said it last week. I'll say it again. The winning way is all I care about, right? That is it. Call me what you want, but I want nothing more than the Raiders to win and win consistently. That is the biggest thing, man. If Josh McDaniels and company can get it done, great. I'm hoping that they can get it done. I've tried to explain this many times to anyone who will listen. I hope they can get it done because I don't want to see the Raiders have to hit the reset button again. Right? Fire a coach, fire a GM, start over. Then they have to bring in their players. It's just like the process is it's still processing. I say it about the Philadelphia 76ers. Like the process is still processing. I'm tired of the Raiders' process still processing. I wanted the process to be over and just start winning, get back to winning ways. So, yeah, you're absolutely right, man. It's all about the winning way, and that's the only way that I care about. And that's simple as that. So thank you so much, Brent, for that call. I do appreciate you. Up next, got a text from Raider Cal in Canada. He said, hey, Q, Raider Cal from Canada, you're not going to the Raiders-Bills game, are you? I didn't see you there. I didn't get to see you last year at the Broncos game at Allegiant Stadium. I mentioned it to the wife, but we woke up too late to go. At the time you had mentioned you'd be there, I was bummed out. Just curious, man. Love listening to you. May be offensive to some, but you may be the Al Davis of Raider podcast. Keep on doing what you do. Raider Cal out. P.S. Do you think they'll beat me up in Buffalo if I show too much passion? Thanks. Just nervous. I'll be respectful. Just never been to another team stadium. I love shouting Raiders with the other fans at our home base in Vegas. I kind of want to do that there. We are the Raiders. Another P.S. It's for my bachelor party, Raider Cal in Canada. Thank you for that text, my man. I appreciate you. And honestly, I don't know what away games I'm going to yet. I don't know what the schedule is. I'm not sure what the Raiders, if they have anything in mind for me extra than what I've been doing. They might. I mean, this preseason, they're going to have me doing the pre and the post game show, and they're going to put JT in the booth where he's going to be doing more of a Manning style cast. So that's what we'll do for preseason. I'm not sure what the goal is or what the plan is for the regular season. As far as I'm concerned, I'll probably just go to the home games and maybe away games that I can drive to, and then just or something that's a quick trip. Because for the most part, I pay for those out of my own pocket. So I just. We'll see. We'll see what the budget looks like. We'll see what the Raiders, if they have any plans. But if I do go to that Buffalo game, I'll definitely let you know. Anytime I go on the road, I like to let people know that I'll be there, but I'm not 100% sure yet. But I'll find out sooner rather than later. And man, you can look. Buffalo Bills fans are passionate about their team. You can be passionate about the Raiders. You really can. Don't worry about it. Go out there, have a good time, yell out Raiders, yell it all day long if you want. They're not. It ain't gonna be that bad, right? I mean, you're fine. It's not a big deal. But thank you so much for that text, and have a great time at your bachelor party, and congratulations. Up next, got a call from Raider Meatloaf. He's calling to talk about the locker room and its leadership. Here he is, Raider Meatloaf.
Hey Q, it's Raider Meatloaf. Just some thoughts I was having. I was listening to somebody talk the other day about leadership in the locker room, and Derek Carr popped up in my mind. You're surrounded by offense and a defense, and if you try to, Derek Carr had so many coaches, and if you try to be a different personality to fit the coach that's coaching you, the guys are going to think you're corny. I love Derek Carr, I was sad to see him go, but at the same time, we saw everything change. When Devontae came to, I'll say Las Vegas, but we'll call it Oakland. But when we saw that, it was kind of changed. He became that rah-rah guy that was trying to chirp up the team and lead the team and be loud. But when he got drafted, he was never that guy. So it might be a reason why he went. The guy's, been around Division I, and they know what corny looks like, and he might have looked corny. So yeah, I just kind of noticed that when Devontae came around that he was the rah-rah guy, and they didn't need that. They didn't need that from him. They needed to be like a silent warrior, kind of like Jimmy G. He's never the rah-rah guy, but people respect him in the locker room. All right, man. Take care.
Meatloaf, thanks for the call. Appreciate you. And I'm not sure how much Derek Carr changed who he was as far as a leader once Devontae arrived. I didn't see that personally myself. If you did, if it's something you noticed, then okay. I didn't see anything different from DC. He seemed like the same guy, except for he was with Devontae, and Devontae is his guy, right? I mean, they were buddies. So that's really all. But I mean, all the interactions I saw with Derek Carr and everyone else in the locker room, it all seemed to be the same to me. But none of that matters. He's in New Orleans. He's trying to lead that locker room now, right? And, wish him all of the best. He's got to go out there, and he's got that task in hand, right? And he's got a good opportunity in that division. As far as Jimmy G, the one thing I've heard about him, we have a lot of questions about Jimmy G, and most of it has to do with staying healthy. But the one thing that I've heard about him consistently is he's a hell of a leader. That's the one thing. Everyone loves playing with him. Even when he was in San Francisco and the Niners had basically said, he's not playing for us, we're going to trade him, we're moving on from him. He wasn't in training camp. He was on another field by himself at training camp. When they welcomed him back because they had injuries, he was still good. He wasn't a distraction. He wasn't nothing. He was still a good dude. So I think that all will be fine as far as the leadership goes with Jimmy G and the players. And, again, even the players that we've talked to so far, when we ask them about Jimmy G, they all have glowing reviews about him and his leadership. So that's never going to be the question, I don't think, when it comes to Jimmy Garoppolo. The big question with him, obviously, will be can he stay healthy? But thank you so much for that call. I do appreciate you. Got time for a couple more? How about this text from Cyrese in the Bay? He says, always love hearing from Mad Max. Dude is inspirational. Funny to hear people say Raiders need 2 to 3 players like Max, though. Devontae Adams and Josh Jacobs are those guys. Elite players at their positions, dedicated to their craft to exhibit toughness and leadership by example. Cornerstone players you could build a franchise around. Seems the Raiders can do better at valuing these players by surrounding them with better complementary talent, quarterback, offensive guard, and, of course, investing in them financially to maximize what they bring to the table. Those guys, by the way, both are probably asking themselves, what are we really doing here when he was talking about Devontae Adams and Josh Jacobs at Cyrese in the Bay? Thanks for the text. And, look, I said it. I said that the Raiders need 2 or 3 more guys like Max. And what I was talking about, and maybe I should have been more specific, is guys with that work ethic, guys that have that passion to be whatever they are and then better. Right, that's what I'm talking about. And I know Devontae Adams is an absolute alpha. Josh Jacobs is an absolute alpha. But I want the guys like Max Crosby who are busting their tail in practice. And I do think that you're going to see that. I think that personality that Max has is going to rub off on some of the guys that aren't, Devontae Adams and Josh Jacobs, guys that'll make them work a little bit harder or push a little bit harder. Remember, Mad Max Crosby was a 4th-round pick. It's not like he was a first-rounder. He was a fourth rounder that worked his way up to where he is right now. That's also what I'm talking about. So this incoming draft class, I'm hoping some of these guys take a look at Max and say, you know what, if I work as hard as him, maybe one day I could be like him. That's what I'm talking about. I understand that they do have some stars. There's no doubt about that. And they do have some alphas in Devontae Adams and Josh Jacobs. But when I say the Raiders need more Max Crosbys, 2 or 3 more Max Crosbys, I'm talking about dudes that are going to grind day in and day out, be the first one in, the last one out, right? Those kind of guys, the guys that are going to look at themselves as a 4th-round pick or a 5th-round pick and just continue to bust their backside to get better and better and better. So that's basically what I'm talking about when I say that. So, but I do appreciate you, and I understand where that could be confusing. So, Cyrezi, it's always good to hear from you. I got one more call, squeeze in really quick. It's a pretty lengthy call here from Raider Eddie in Denver, but he's calling to talk about Josh Jacobs and has a few questions about him moving forward. Here he is, Raider Eddie in Denver.
Hey, Q, what's up? This is Raider Eddie in Denver. I just want to ask you about Josh Jacobs and what I think is an issue that people don't necessarily want to bring up, and that is in the 2020 season and the 2021 season, Jacobs was not very efficient. He had a lot of yardage. He had he had a good amount of carries. So I think he was over 1,000 yards in both those seasons. And he did have, I think, double-digit touchdowns in at least one or maybe both of those seasons. But what I actually care about is how effective the running back is on every carry. So I look at efficiency and I look at yards per carry. He was at 4.0 and 3.9, which are pretty average, if not below average, for a running back. And so after the 2021 season, the Raiders did not pick up Jacobs' 5th-year option. And I don't recall any controversy about that decision. I don't remember anybody saying, hey, Jacobs has actually earned that 5th-year option to be picked up. I think it seemed to me that there was a consensus that he didn't quite earn that 5th-year option, right? The other thing that I recall, even though he didn't miss a lot of games, Jacobs did waive himself out of games frequently because he was nicked up, because he was, I guess, injured and couldn't always, finish out games. That is something I very distinctly remember. So he had one great year in a contract season. My question is this: how confident are you that Jacobs could actually perform like he just did? And do you think his performance might change if he was in a contract year versus a non-contract year? Okay. Thank you. Love to hear your thoughts. All right.
Eddie, thanks for the call, my man. And look, I'll just say this. He averaged 4 yards and 3.9. Those 2 seasons that you mentioned, you're right. But that's a first down if you carry the rock 3 times, right? And I know that that's not superstar numbers, but his rookie year, he averaged 4.8, and last year he averaged 4.9. So he's shown that he could be a pretty consistent back throughout the course of his career. I don't think that there's any drop-off coming from Josh Jacobs anytime soon. He has an edge to him. He runs with a chip on his shoulder. He has a lot to prove. He's had a lot to prove since the minute he came into the league. Of course, last year he did run with a little bit more, edge to him or chip on his shoulder because, yeah, he was angry. And guess what? The good thing for Raider Nation, he's probably going to be angry this year too. And that'll be even better, right? You'll probably see an outstanding season from Josh Jacobs once he gets in there. So, I'm not worried about Josh and him not living up to the hype after he gets a contract extension. I really am not. That's the one guy I'm not worried about. And I did think that, when the Raiders had to make that choice of picking up the 5th-year option, we all knew Cleve Farrell wasn't going to get it. We all knew Jonathan Abram wasn't going to get it. But I thought that there was a good chance that they were going to pick up the 5th-year option on JJ. And I remember being pretty surprised that they didn't. And then they also ran him in the Hall of Fame game, and that was surprising too. So that all led to the chip on his shoulder and the edge that he had to him when he went out there and played in 2022. I have no problems with Josh Jacobs, and I will not question the guy who is Josh Jacobs. Now, if the Raiders decide to hold on to him for the next couple of years, great. If they don't, that's a decision that they make, and they'll have to do what they do, and they'll base that off of what goes on with running backs and the data when it comes to running backs and when they start to drop off. But Josh Jacobs is only 25. He's only been in the league 4 years, so I think he's got a good 2 or 3 strong years left before that drop-off starts to happen. But Raider Eddie, thank you for that call. I do appreciate you. That's going to do it for today's show. Thank you as always. Excited about this week as training camp is underway. Of course, the rookies are already there. The veterans report tomorrow. We'll talk to Josh McDaniels tomorrow, and then the first day of practice will be on Wednesday. So look forward to that. We're locked and loaded, and we're back. Right? The NFL season is right around the corner. So until tomorrow, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.